Does anybody have any questions before we start?
No. Just get over it.
So we were down to 6 people who have failed the math test. So I sent an email out to you. If you failed it, you need to get that past the new dead date. The new drop dead date, I think is what I meant to say, but a little Freudian slip of some sort, is Tuesday night. And so, by the way, when I opened it up to the whole class. And so if you want to go back in and redo the math test again, you're welcome to try to improve your score too. But I'm down to just 6 students who have not gotten through it. So questions on that?
Was it like a pass-fail?
Yeah, it's a pass-fail. You got to get at least 70% on it. So if you got 70%, you're done. All right, but you made it. Yes, I have found that the success rate in the class is positively correlated with getting a 70% on the math test. What does positive correlation between 2 variables mean again? As passing the math test goes up, success in econ goes up. Yes, they're positively related, right? Number of failure rates goes up, then the number of failure rates in econ goes up. So anyway, the 70% things have been working out so far. So we dipped our toe into chapter 3 last time. And this is just going to kind of be a little summary to bridge the gap. I told you that we'll be going back to this stuff quite a bit to hopefully set the stage for. I had to reboot my computer here to get my other computer going. So, unlimited wants with limited resources is our study of economics. And so, we didn't talk about this one yet. This is, you might have looked it over, but this is what I call bucket theory. So the name of the slides is called Bucket Theory and Circular Flows. So what I like to think about in terms of limited resources is that at a point in time, we could imagine trying to take an inventory of society's resources. So there's actually a kind of a quantity of resources available of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So granted, this is kind of an abstract thought, but in reality, like right now, we could take an inventory of the resources at our disposal. What I want you to imagine is what's inside these buckets is the stock of resources, in the economy. And we've got all these people here that are trying to maximize their happiness individually, and if each one is individually happy, then we hopefully have a society or an economy of happy agents. But of course we know that some might be sad at the same time some are angry. Those of you who are in Brown Hall have this face on. I know this is kind of at a distance here. Although maybe the hotel accommodations are nicer than Brown Hall anyway, so maybe you're now once again happy again, I don't know. And, you know, some other people. So we all have different things that we need to go through. All right, so that's our stock of resources in the economy. And then the next one I wanted to cover was the difference between stocks and flows. So how does the bucket level change over time? In other words, what's that bucket level going to look like in 2017, on August 29, 2017? What's that bucket level going to look like? Is it going to go up or down? So how it changes is by what we call flow variables over time. And so with capital, remember that's not money in econ class, right? So what's coming to mind when I say the word capital? No, lands over here in the capital bucket. Machinery, tools, buildings, computers, right? Man-made stuff that helps make other stuff is our capital bucket. And so over the course of the year, that's going to change by the amount of investment that we do. So these are technical kind of macroeconomic terms, but the concept's the same. So the amount of money that we spend on machines, the number of new machines, the number of new buildings, brand new ones, new tools, right? The amount of resources that are devoted towards capital type purchases is going to raise the bucket level up. At the same time, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, which I don't know, does that even make sense to you guys? Do you know that? What's that from? There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. The song, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket. It was on Sesame Street, was where I first learned it. Now, I couldn't even remember if you guys have seen the Sesame Street reruns that I did, but so there's a hole in our bucket, and that hole can be characterized, again, kind of a technical term sometimes, as depreciation. Might be a technical term from an accounting standpoint, right? So from an economic standpoint, economic depreciation sometimes is different than accounting, what you do for tax purposes. So if you bought a $30,000 machine and the government told you that you could do a straight line depreciation over 5 years, you'd be depreciating $6,000 of value each year off your tax return. That has nothing to do with economics in the broader sense, right? I already told you economics has accounting as a subdiscipline under it, so it is in there somewhere. But it has nothing to do with the actual ability to do activities, to do production. So the 3-year-old laptop, this one's 2 years old. I think this is my second year. This is my second laptop. This thing, still being 1.5 years old, let's call it, still functions the way it did before, right? Just because it's old and the IRS allowed me to deduct some depreciation for it in a dollars and cents way, doesn't take away from its productivity, how productive it is. In other words, me getting my work done at the campus to respond back to emails, harass students that haven't passed the math test yet, that kind of stuff, that's me being a professor, right? It doesn't matter if this machine is 2 years old or brand new for that particular function, other than maybe a little fraction of a millisecond in speed with the new computer versus the old. It allows me to be equally productive, regardless of which one I'm using, right? So there's economic obsolescence or economic depreciation, which means when does this thing really go in the garbage can, right? When is it no longer functioning or allowing me to function to do my activities? That's kind of the depreciation that we're talking about here, where something is eventually worn out and done, and it goes away. So that's one of the holes in our bucket for capital. And so as machines wear out and are basically worthless in terms of their productivity, then that's an outflow and the capital bucket starts to fall. So we've got two competing forces of flows that are going on from August 29th, 2016 to August 29th, 2017. We're going to buy new computers economy-wide now, right, on the whole island. We're going to buy a bunch of computers, and some of them are going to wear out. And if this is bigger than this, the bucket level drops. If this is bigger than this, the bucket level rises, right? All through our choices of what we decided to buy in terms of capital. So the capital stock, the actual amount at a point in time, is called a stock variable. And the amount of purchases that were done during the year is the flow variable. And the amount that wore out during the year is also a flow variable. So it's good to think about these relationships of stocks and flows as we evaluate things. So let me give you an example that I'll have you macro kids stay quiet, because I think I probably did this same example before. But suppose I told you that I make $110,000. Am I doing pretty good? For the United States, living in Ottawa, Kansas, 110,000? See a lot of heads shaking yes. So the variable income, that's a pretty good income, right? But as I told you that, what did you implicitly do with the 110,000? What was the time frame? A year. because a lot of times we talk about annual incomes, but I didn't say that. So you guys didn't listen very carefully, because what if I said, suppose I told you I make $110,000 every 10 years. I immediately went from being pretty well-to-do to poverty, right, in the blink of an eye, by telling you the time frame. Likewise, if I would have told you I make about $110,000 a month, now I ripped right back up to the top 1% in a blink of an eye. So I've gone from extremely rich to extremely poor, all through the definition of how income is. And so my point with all that is that income, the variable in kind of an economic sense, the variable income is a flow variable. That variable only has meaning over a stated time period, over some amount of time. In other words, again, the $110,000 was meaningless unless I added to it 110 per 10 years, 110 per month, 110 per year. You see what I mean? So that variable has no meaning unless there's a time frame associated with it. So that's a flow variable. Now, what if I told you I've got $110,000 in my checking account today? Does that variable have meaning? I have $110,000 in my checking account right now. Does that have meaning? Yeah. It'll even have more meaning if I said, I have $110,000 in my checking account, and we're going to go to Kansas City tonight and not come home until it's all spent. The whole class, kind of a little class trip. Does that have meaning for you a little? Yeah, right? Now, incidentally, I remember about this with that example. I've done this example many times, but the spending that I do compared to right now to the end of the night when we come home from Kansas City, that again is a flow variable. The amount of spending that was done between now and midnight tonight, or whenever we come home from Kansas City when it's all gone, the amount of spending was a flow variable, right? And now, of course, my checking account balance, the way I phrased that, the new stock variable is my checking account balance is going to be 0 when we come home, right? So there's a connection there between spending, checking account balance, income, flows. All of that is the stock and flow concept. And there's lots of different stock and flow concepts. If we think about labor, our labor bucket, what would be one of the things that causes the labor supply to change? What's that? Unemployment? Yeah, and so if we look at the labor force, though, we might take the people who are willing and able to work, and so even though they're unemployed, they're still in the labor force. They're part of the labor pool, if you will. They're just not working. That was kind of a technical macro thing there that most of you micro people don't have to worry about yet. So what about the labor? What else would cause the supply of available workers, whether they're working or not, but they want to work, to change over time? New technology?
Housing.
What's that?
Housing.
Housing. Available housing might attract more people, is what you're thinking, to a particular area? Maybe. What's that?
The age of the workforce.
The age of the workforce. Yeah. So that might be like babies. 18 years later are all of a sudden, or 16 years technically for the labor force. So we could think about the population. In fact, the population of the United States could be our bucket. What is the population today? What is the population later? Well, how many babies are we cranking out is the flow. So the variable would be the birth rate, right? The birth rate, or the number of births, that would be the flow. And then, of course, this one we don't like to talk a lot about, but the old hole in the bucket would be death. The death rate, if we're dealing with rates, or the number of deaths. So births, deaths, population. If more people are being born than are dying, bucket level starts to rise. If more people die compared to being born, the bucket level falls. Right? So we can look at population as the stock and flow concept. So these are all over the place when we start to, anytime you identify one of these stock variables, something that has meaning at a point in time, like my checking account balance, like the population of the United States, if it has meaning at a point in time, then just think about, well, what causes that to change over time? Whatever causes it to change over time, that's your flow variables, whether it's a leakage or an inflow. Okay, questions or comments on that? So land, you know, the natural forces, Grand Canyon, if we want to go way back, or might cause land to wash away if we don't have erosion control. So we can think about the amount of topsoil that's being gone in a given year. We can look at levels of rainfall, all kinds of things with natural resources, and apply kind of this stock and flow concept. Entrepreneurship, you know, what kind of people are out there, how educated are they, what sort of rules are in place to start a business. In the United States, it can take a while, but it's not too bad. In fact, I was pretty happy with this. It would have taken most people a little bit longer, but I formed a limited liability company in Kansas for the first time this last spring. I bought a little fixer-upper house to play around with, and I was able to form a limited liability company in about 44 minutes. Not too bad. Now, I knew what I was doing with the documents. I think if you were like cold turkey, and because I had set up other, or been a part of other limited liability companies, so I kind of knew some of the stuff that I needed to do. But even if you didn't, I'd say you could probably set up your own business, do some quick research. Maybe you'd have to make a few phone calls. But probably in 4 hours or so, you guys could be the owners of a limited liability company in the United States. So is it easy to do that, or is it not? If we go to some other countries around the world, they might have special licensing, and you got to go before the board and tell them what your business is going to be and going to function, and whether you met all the safety requirements. And of course, some businesses are like that in the United States as well, that you might have to have certain licenses in place to do certain types of activities. But as far as setting up a business, it wasn't too bad. God bless America. Estonia, on the other hand, they were able to do it in 18 minutes, I read. So they were a little quicker than us on being able to set up your own business in Estonia. So that can cause there to be maybe higher levels of entrepreneurial activity depending on the culture and the norms and the education and other factors. Okay, questions or comments on the bucket theory, stocks and flows? All right. Next important one. So the idea of maximizing happiness comes about from transforming scarce resources that we really don't have any particular value in, other than the value that they bring to make other things, if that makes sense. So I want to think about the production process of how do we get the things we like, the pizza, clothing, basketballs, beer, chicken wings, all the other stuff that we make. There's really something quite amazing that goes on day in and day out in the United States that we mostly all take for granted. And that is the transformation of these resources into those things. How does it get done? Who knows about it? Who's got the blueprints? You know, how are we going to know that we've got the right amount of pizza and the right amount of shirts and the right amount of basketballs? You know, who's controlling all this? Well, in short, in a free market system in general, the capitalist side of the spectrum, we tend to let those decisions be done by individuals rather than any one single person or government or group of people, right? And so those decisions get made day in and day out by individuals. And so part of what we're going to learn in this chapter, and especially the next and maybe the next kind of 3 chapters, is do we get it right? What comfort level do we have that we get the right amount of EpiPens? How many EpiPen users do I got in here? Got to be a couple. No? No EpiPen? You guys heard about this EpiPen thing?
Yeah.
So what's going on with the EpiPen?
Basically, save your life if you do an allergic reaction. You just protect yourself real fast.
Yep, it's got the medicine all in this pen, which is like a syringe that's kind of protected in a special way, so that if you're having allergic reaction. If you're allergic to bees, or I think it works for peanuts too, right? For peanut allergies or whatever, if you're starting to swell up and you're going to basically choke, you grab your pen and you shoot it, or somebody else can do it for you, and you get the medicine. So what was the issue, somebody other than I, with the EpiPen? Well, it's been in the news here in the last few days. Yeah. What's your name? Gavin. They're raising the prices. Yeah, the prices have kind of slowly risen. They're not like jacking them up right now, but I think a paper, I don't know if it was the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or somebody, basically a journalist did a little investigating and found that the EpiPens are going for about $600 and some, which was a, I can't remember the percentage, but a tremendous increase over the last 5 to 10 years or whatever for the EpiPen. And so, does the market system have it right? You know, if the pens, the EpiPens, are being issued by a private company that has the drug, which I think is called Mylan. Is that right? If I remember that is up on it, is it called Mylan? Yeah, Mylan is the company that owns the rights to the EpiPen. You know, are we getting the correct quantity by allowing a private company to do these pens? So, kind of an interesting story with that one is they've jacked up the price. Why were they able to jack up the price so much? They got a monopoly on it, right? They're basically, demand is there. It's a term that I'm not even going to mention right now that we'll learn about later here this week. And so the demand is there. That's kind of fine to say that. But there's also something not there. And somebody mentioned monopoly. What do you mean by that? There's not very much competition, right? And that's really what's making that not work so well. Now, what you might not have thought about, that it was talked about in the media. Sometimes I have to hit the media upside the head, but in this particular case, they brought it up, which is good. Why don't they have any competition? Shoot, selling these pens for $600. You know how much actual dollar value of medicine that's inside the pen? $2, yeah, roughly. Yeah. $2 worth of medicine. Why aren't there 150 companies developing this thing? Patents, and it actually, in this particular case, it goes beyond patents.
Technology of making it.
Yeah, so basically the government is doing this more so even than patents, but the little blip that I heard, and I don't have all the details on this, so forgive me, but that the FDA has kind of extended their situation of government protection for this because they didn't want to confuse the consumer on different delivery methods. So in the effort of public safety, the government thought it was more important to have a consistent delivery system, if you will, of the EpiPen. So Mylan was one of the first movers in this marketplace, and don't get me wrong, they developed an awesome product of this quick delivery system. Of course, that delivery system is patented. But now the FDA has said, because everybody kind of knows how the EpiPen works, in the effort of public safety, let's not allow other products with different delivery systems. Remember, the drug is $2, right? So it's really the delivery system that's being protected. And in doing so, it's allowed this pricing to go on at $600 and there to not be an effective competitor, even though there's probably lots of people fully capable and able to, if they don't copy the EpiPen, if they deliver the medicine in some other way. So kind of an interesting story there with the EpiPen. We'll see how that shakes out. So right now, Mylan, the company, is doing some damage control because in the eyes of the public, they're just gouging, right? They're just gouging. And so what's caused these prices, the journalist who did the report said that there doesn't appear to be any, increase in cost that could even come close to the 200, 300% raise in price that's gone on. So it's not like the cost of plastic is higher or the labor's price has gone up, right? The cost of the resources is about the same. It just seems to be, pure profit. And so they're trying to do some damage control on that. And I think there's multiple forms of damage control. The thing that I like about this story is that hopefully the government might learn a lesson about the government and business getting in bed together, because there's also some stories here of what we call cronyism, of Mylan being a big donor into certain political funds that help keep that protection alive, right? And that's the bad part that I'm especially upset with the way we run things in the United States. Is I don't think those two things belong together as tightly. And this is just one example of where that can hurt a lot of people if we start thinking about how much the EpiPen is used across the nation and kind of the public benefit that it might bring about. That's pretty good. Now, if I was Mylan, I might be trying to spin. Of course, they might be lying through their teeth, but if they would frame the question as, well, our overall profits have been pretty low because we've been doing so much research and development into these other life-saving, they were trying to develop a drug for cancer. And they're like, hey, you know, we jacked up the EpiPen, yeah, we did, but look at our bottom line. Look at what we're reinvesting in, right? The other things that the profits from EpiPen are allowing us to do on the cutting edge of cancer research or something like that. That'd be a kind of a nice spin to put on it, right? That they're reinvesting. Now, again, I have no clue if that's the truth, but so often the media shortchanges these excess profits that are going on, and all we hear is profit. We hear 600%, $600. We think about the person who maybe can't have the EpiPen because they can't afford it, and we think about the executive that's down in the Bahamas on the beach with a margarita and a cigar. And that might not be the case, right? If the company is reinvesting those profits into other activities, maybe it's no big deal. I don't know. Did I see a hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, but in the same article, it says the CEO took in $16 million.
Oh yeah, that's right. So CEO pay got in there too. That's right. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So that was kind of an important one, that the CEO pay. So it's more closer to the margarita cigar deal, and she must like cigars. I think it's female, right? That's the CEO. Yeah. What was the amount? 16
million.
In 1 year? Or? Yeah. So then we get into the whole argument of CEO pay and what's it based on, and is it incentive pay, or is it kind of a bunch of Wall Street hocus pocus that lines the pockets of the rich? That's part of what we're going to have in this class. Is I don't like to just tell stories like that where we have mixed emotions, right? The tools that you're going to learn in this class are going to allow you to kind of dissect that and to kind of think a level deeper. Economists are pretty good at thinking unintended consequences. So usually we have kind of a cause and effect type of thing that most of the media will pay attention to, and they might say, oh, well, this hurts this person, this helps this person. And hopefully some of the tools that we learn in class are going to help you be able to understand those effects better and maybe make some predictions on your own, because the headlines are going to keep rolling off the printing presses. Guaranteed, they never stop. It's just a process. And so hopefully we can provide you a stock of knowledge that you can take into the production process later to hopefully not only better yourselves, but as Adam Smith said, to better an interest that was not of your intention, the public interest. By you doing what's best for yourself, it turns out that you serve a public good. You serve the greater interest of society. Okay, so production process. No dollars involved here. Well, let me point out one other thing. There's lots of different blueprints possible here. There's lots of different blueprints of how we can make the pizza. Do we have a fancy pizza? Actually, I went to this pancake breakfast thing for my son was doing a fundraiser. He plays with the Ottawa Suzuki Strings. It's a violin group, and they were doing a fundraiser pancake breakfast. And this guy was called the Pancake Guy or something, and he had this awesome machine. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it was basically the size of a 8-foot conference table, but it was the griddle. And then on top of it, he had this machine, and he'd roll it over. The machine was full of pancake batter, and then he would press a button or do a lever, and 4 pancakes were made. And then he had it on little rollers. I could tell it looked homemade, like he did this himself, but maybe he bought it somewhere. Then he'd roll it down, pull the lever, pull the lever, the lever. He's got 4, 8, 12, 16 pancakes. He could fill up that whole like that. So it was pretty awesome system. That would have been a more labor intensive, like when I told you guys it was pancake breakfast, how many volunteers were probably working the griddle? How many volunteers were likely working the griddle at maybe a pancake breakfast you've done at your hometowns and stuff? What's that, 2? Yeah, a couple people, right? And you're doing a little scoop with the ladle or whatever. Here, using a machine, he was a one-man show. He did it all. So he would get those pancakes down. He'd have enough time to sit back and have a little talk. Oh, okay, you want? And then his little thing was flipping the pancakes to the customers, like way up in the air. He was flipping pancakes. So we had one machine, one person handling that. Whereas without that machine, it might be a 2-person job with some more simple tools, right? So what is the combination of labor and capital for the production process? So that's part of what the market system answers for us. These 3 basic questions: what are we going to produce? How are we going to do it? And who's going to get it? Those are 3 questions that every economy must answer. Even Cuba, the dictator, dictator regimes where they have to figure out, what are we going to make? Well, the central planner, I know what we should make. I know what you need. Right? The government says, I know what you need. How are we going to do it? Oh, I got to figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'll talk to my buddy, the engineer, and we'll figure it out. And then who's going to get it? Oh, I'm going to treat everybody fairly, of course. Everybody's going to get 2 pancakes. 2 for you, 2 for you, 2 for you. Right? So the central planner, the dictator, can answer those questions too. It's just another way of answering the questions. And so we have to think about, what are the benefits from allowing individuals dispersed through the economy to answer those questions? And so what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, and who's going to get it comes to us from this market system. All right, let's turn to the next one, 2.4. This is one we saw already. That the specialization of labor sets up kind of 2 groups here, of businesses and households. The households is really society. That is our economy. The whole population lives over here. Every single resource, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, is tied to a human being. So we are the owners of all of the resources. And we can choose what to do with those resources. It's just a matter of figuring out what we want to do. And so people take their characteristics and their skills and whatever makes them special, that maybe was through education or just natural ability. So LeBron James lives over here with the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Not all of us could have gone to school to become a Cleveland Cavalier, right? So there's a lot of natural abilities that might be embodied in each one of us. Other types of skills can be learned, and that's part of why you guys are in your seats. And so we all develop this varied resource base of human capital and organize ourselves in the form of a firm, at least for part of the day. All right, the market system. Here it is in a nutshell. We're going to ignore the government for right now. So we'll bring the government in soon enough. But this is Jen on the island in the big picture. So the real economy is going on down here in what we call the resource market or the factor market. Resources, factors of production. You can kind of use those interchangeably. So the resource market is where we have the sale of land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship being supplied to the businesses turning around and paying them wages, salaries, rents, interest, profits, all of the dollars that go as payment to the factors of production. Upstairs, we take our paycheck and we run to Walmart. Walmart has stuff on the shelves. We pay for those goods and services. So this is in what we call the goods market or the output market, or the market for final goods and services. Again, there's multiple words, but we want to think about the final good that ultimately brings us happiness That's what's coming over this direction. And so we've got dollars for those things. So that's it. That capitalist system, kind of the free market system in a nutshell, especially with no government involved, of the exchanges that would go on. The real economy, remember when I talked about piercing the veil of the economy, that dollars tend to kind of mask what the real activity of the economy is? That's this inner circle, the red circle. This is the amazing part to me as you start to study economics of what goes on day in and day out, is that we have resources that are transformed into goods and services. And that's what we get to enjoy, right? That's the kind of the amazing part. The dollars help lubricate that system and make the trades happen faster and smoother. So the dollars at the end of the day, this is a little more macroeconomic in nature, but it works at an individual level as well. The money that we earn in by going to work is what gets spent on final goods and services. That gives us our spending, both at the individual level, but actually more so at the macro level because of borrowing and some other things that individuals can do between each other. We have all of the income for the country. The income for the system is equal to the dollars that were spent on brand new final goods and services. That's it. That's the market system. I've got these little reminders in here that you can't see way in the back. These are just little supply and demand curves to help you remember that that's what we mean by the market system, is that we've got individuals supplying and demanding here. And notice that the roles are reversed. In the labor market, the supply of resources comes from the households. Up here, of course, Walmart is supplying, they're the supply curve up in the output market. Most of what we do in the early chapters is with the output market. So we're going to be upstairs for most of the course, actually. And then we'll drop downstairs for a little bit towards the end of one of the last week or two in class. All right, questions or comments there? All right, enter the government. Which we'll spend a little more time on. It's just good to make sure that this is on the table early on.
It's not working.
There we go. Figure 2.6. Our plate of spaghetti is getting a little bit thicker. So all I'm doing is building off of what we had on before, right? What does the government do for us? Well, they spend money in 3 different ways, the way I've got characterized here. G1, G2, and G3. And so the government has to interact in the market system in those 3 ways. So what are some things that the government spends money on in the output market, potentially just buying it from a private business? What are some things that would be in G1? Guns, good. What else? Paper, toilet paper for the White House would actually fall into that category, right? So paper, toilet paper, guns, weapons of mass destruction in general, right? Aircraft, stealth bombers, roads, highways, infrastructure, right? All of that stuff, they are likely buying from American companies usually. Although in today's global world, sometimes that's hard to define even. But the government is going to Walmart to buy that toilet paper. And so part of the goods and services that are flowing from Walmart are not all going to private households. Some of those goods are coming right into the White House, right? So that's one area where the government gets involved with. Down here, the government needs employees too. Somebody has to clean the royal toilet. I don't know if this for sure. Maybe Barack and Michelle split duties like other households do on cleaning out the toilet, but likely they have a housekeeper, I'm guessing, right? And so, and I don't blame him for that. I would too. He's got plenty of things on his mind, and her mind too. A lot of important things going on. So in order to purchase the labor for that, that person is not working at a private company. That person's working for the White House. So the government's kind of siphoned off a little flow of our resource base. They're using up some of our resources that in their absence, not complete absence, I'm not going for anarchy here, but if that job was eliminated, that person would likely go to work over here if they wanted to continue working. You see what I'm saying? So it's important to think about what's really going on. Like, it's not just as easy as, oh, well, we can just hire more people. Couldn't we all work for the government? We could. That's kind of what communism is in a sense. I mean, we could all be working for the United States government. All these businesses could be just run by the government. And that would be a larger, fatter arrow. That's what we were talking about last time as we moved down last week when we moved down the spectrum from capitalism to socialism to communism. This one starts to get narrower, the flow of resources to businesses, and this one gets fatter, right? More control of resources going into the White House. So the White House doesn't get those people for free, of course. They're going to spend some money, and then that turns into their income, and then those people go to Applebee's for a steak dinner too, right? And so that's their flow of resources from the resource market. And then G3 is kind of a special category. Notice that the arrow is going straight over to here, straight over to here. And so it's kind of what I call the Robin Hood theory. So Robin Hood theory deals with transfer payments. They're actually not, creating anything new. They're not buying a new goods or service, or they're not buying a resource. They're just taking money from someone and giving it to someone else. And so that is money coming in through taxes, usually the income tax, which brings me kind of my discussion of the two sources of two areas where the government gets their money. There is only two. From the market system, they get it off the cash register, right? T2 is the sales tax. And you guys ring up your purchases at the cash register. If you buy $100 worth of stuff, here in Kansas, it's going to run you about $109, right? So the government's going to have $9 funneling down to it from the sales tax. Likewise, if you're down here, your company pays you $100,000. You don't get $100,000 in your hand. We got maybe, I don't know, it depends on your tax rate, but $20,000 to $30,000, probably $30,000, getting close to anyway, coming up here to the White House with the income tax. That's the only two sources, sales tax and income tax. The tax code is very complex because there's multiple types of income taxes and multiple types of sales taxes. But in a nutshell, for us in Principles of Economics class, it's really just those two places. And so that income comes up, the rich, back to my Robin Hood theory, take from the rich, give to the poor. The G3 here is that part of that spending just goes to somebody else. Yes?
Is that for things like welfare?
Yes, welfare, unemployment claims, Social Security, Medicaid, Obamacare subsidies, all that kind of stuff is a transfer payment where it's taking from one person and giving to somebody else. So unemployment insurance is take from the employed, give to the unemployed, right? So there's all kinds of transfer payments. It goes well beyond take from the rich, give to the poor, although the take from the rich, give to the poor is the one that gives probably the biggest headlines. Okay, any other questions or comments there? All right. So again, if the government plays a larger and larger role, oh, by the way, before I forget, I'll get back to that too. What percentage of spending do you guess is in the G3 category? So we've got, remember now, let me help you out again. Weapons of mass destruction, things like national defense and other types of spending, toilet paper at the White House, although that might fall into the G3. So G2 is spending on resources like the hired staff and the other resources. And then G3 is these transfer payments. So out of $1,000 worth of tax coming into the White House, what fraction of that is devoted to transfer payments? Do you figure? What's your guess? Can't be wrong. I'm just kind of curious. I want to make sure everybody knows the question correctly. Maybe I'm going to come to the back of the room, get your guys' opinion on this. So what fraction of taxes are used for transfer payments? So no roads or bridges, that's the G, the roads and bridges and stuff, that's more of the G1 and G2 category. So what do you think back here? What do you think? 2%? What do you think? Yeah, that's bad. Let's come here. 10%? So I got 2%, 10%. You ready with your answer? I'm just going to point to you. I want everybody in here to have an answer. 6%. 5, 15, 40, 45, 12, 6, 12, 16, 30%, 17%. I got something to tell you. I'm glad I did that exercise. I almost didn't do it that way. 70%. So I heard 2, 6, 15, 16. So every $100 that you spend to the government, that you send up to the White House, $70 of that is going to somebody else through what we call a transfer payment. It's shockingly high, and I've got some other data that I won't show you today. It's really more of a macro topic, but it's kind of a hockey stick if you look at the picture of the percent. The percent that I just told you, that's 15, 30, you guys were saying I'm up to 50%, 60, 70%. If you look from 1970, it's kind of like this, and then here's 2016, it's like that. And that's 2016 where we're at. That's the trend of government spending, and the fraction that's going towards transfer payments as opposed to spending on roads and bridges and education and all of that stuff. So that is where our the vast majority of our federal income tax dollars are going, is to this transfer payment category. It's a pretty big deal, and I'm okay if we have, as a group, we kind of feel like we need to have higher tax rates for the rich. In fact, I totally agree with that, by the way. Proportionately more taxes for the rich compared to the poor. But this is alarming that this is going up. I mean, how high is it going to go? 100%? 99%? Where's the right number? And then if it's 99%, then we just keep collecting more, and just more of it's going out the door. I mean, it's alarming the level or the trend that it's going. So, and that's a little bit of stuff that I've been doing a little bit of research on too, because it's kind of cool stuff. Scary, but cool stuff from a researcher's standpoint. All right, so that covers government. I think this kind of tees us up. That's where we're gonna stop with this and get to the board. Any other questions or comments before I put that up? By the way, I wasn't told, you guys were a little lower than I thought you'd be, especially when you guys were into sixes. I totally get it. This is your first econ class. You haven't even thought about these issues before. So, but your gut feeling on how much goes towards roads and bridges and public spending, it's hopefully an eye opener, because I think it's something to be concerned about. Okay, but now we're going to learn why we maybe should be concerned about it. And not too concerned, it's more of just a general concern. Most of the material in here that I want to, or that I go over, is how it relates to your real life and the decisions that you make day in and day out. Not necessarily what you do in the voting booths. That is not one of my primary concerns. not even close to primary, like it's about this much and the rest of econ's about this much on your individual decision making. All right, let me get this little thing here. Okay. All right, so let's see, let's do a little bit of better angle here. All right. So what did we leave off with last time? What do you got in your notes? Law of supply. Get rid of this. So we were talking about beer. You had some really important topics here. So we had law of supply, law of demand, and this idea of equilibrium. So you guys have it in your notes already. I'm just going to kind of shortcut this a little bit, because I did want to be a little more formal about what these quantities were. So our equilibrium was at, what was it, 240?
Yes.
Yeah.
And a price of 8? Okay, so you guys have the full graph already on your notes from last time, so I'm just kind of doing a little shortcut method here. And I want to talk about this idea of equilibrium. So, equilibrium. I've got one kind of general definition that I like to use, and that is a situation in which there is no tendency for change. A situation in which there's no tendency for change. So in our graphs, we're going to usually put a little P star. So $8 was the equilibrium price, which I'll note on the board with a little star there. So equilibrium price, P star, is the price at which quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. The price at which quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. That was not going on at $4. Remember, at a price of $4, the quantity demanded. Now, everybody kind of watch what I do here, because this is where it gets really confusing for students sometimes. So if you're looking for the quantity demanded, how much people want to buy, at $4, you go over to the demand curve and head south and read off that number. That's the quantity demanded at a price of $4. And for your papers, what was that? How much? $3.20. That was the quantity that people wanted to buy, right? The quantity that was supplied on the shelves, we go over to the supply curve, drop south, and what was that number? 160, right? So the quantity supplied was 60, the quantity demanded was 320. They didn't equal each other. And so 4 was not in equilibrium. A $4 price was not in equilibrium because quantity demanded does not equal quantity supplied. And what did we call that situation? A shortage. So note, you guys already have that written on your sheet, so that's fine. Note, at a price equal to $4, there is a shortage because the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. The shortage is equal to quantity demanded minus quantity supplied equals 320 minus 160 equals 160 units. So we were short the difference between quantity demanded and quantity supplied. All right, so we also will talk about equilibrium quantity. Equilibrium quantity, Q star, is the quantity at a price where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. In other words, it's really a shortcut. It's just saying that we're going to shorthand and just call it Q star, but it's actually the same thing as what we said with the equilibrium price. At $8, the quantity supplied is 240. The quantity demanded, go over to the demand curve, is 240. So we're just going to call that Q star. So it's the quantity that satisfies the equilibrium condition at P star, at $8. So most of the time I won't write QS, QD, Q star, I'll just put Q star, right? So it's kind of a shortcut to showing that. So any questions there? All right, and if there was a shortage, like there was at $4, there is a tendency for change. How so? That's what we talked about last time. So at $4, there is a tendency for change. In what respect? What was the story that we told with that? About the beer being cheap. And so what was the actions? How is there going to be change tomorrow? How are people going to change their behavior? Price is going to go up. Who's going to want it to go up? The store owner, right, for one thing. So that means at a price of $4, there is tendency for change. The store owner is going to want to have higher probably because they opened their store at 10 a.m. By noon they were sold out. They're like, oh, duh, I must have had it too cheap. Right? That was too aggressive of a sale. But I also told the story that on the consumer side, there might be incentive for those prices to go up. Why? What was going on there?
People that didn't get theirs.
People that didn't get theirs, yeah. So we've got 160 people that are pretty happy with the $4. They're like, that's okay. But there's another 160 people that got screwed, right? That didn't get to buy it. And so they're going to have incentive. They might have been willing to pay something that we'll talk about later. I feel like bringing it up now. This demand curve shows the willingness of people to pay, right? And so if we ordered people from the highest, the most willing to pay to the lowest, somebody out there, the very first 6-pack of beer, somebody was willing to pay $15, right? Somebody out there was willing to pay it. You know who they are, right? The person who's gotta have their beer, otherwise they get the shakes and stuff. That's that person, right? So that person's willing to pay more. Or if they have a really urgent need for it that day and they're totally loaded anyway, right? They're making $110,000 a year, maybe that's not total, $110,000 a month. They don't really give a rip if the 6-pack's $15 or if it's $8, right? So there are people out there that were willing to pay a lot more for that. And so if that person works till 5, they're pretty mad about it. And they're the ones that are going to say, hey, hold some back for me. That was the story I told. Hold some back for me to make sure. I'll give you $6. I'll give you $10 if you just make sure you hold it back for me. I know you got this awesome sale going, but let me give you even more. So those unsatisfied consumers at that low price, they're going to tend to put upward pressure on prices as well. Okay, so that's disequilibrium and equilibrium. Questions or comments there? All right, so what was the most important word, the new word for many of you, the most important word on both laws? What was that word that was probably a new word for you? Ceteris paribus, good. What did that mean? All other things held constant for both parties, right? People supplying the beer, people buying the beer. So holding all of the things constant, here's what they have. Now, as soon as we start changing some things, we start to get changes in the equilibrium. So that's what we're going to focus on next. If there is an increase in, well, let me, before I do that, what are some of these other things? Let me start with that. So for demand, what are some other things that influence our decision to buy? So, in other words, things other than price. The law of demand said that as the price goes up, the quantity demanded does down, right? So the law of demand was specific to price, ceteris paribus, holding all of the things constant. So what are some of those things? We weren't denying that they're not important. What are some things that influence our decision to buy? Yeah. Say it again. The benefit. Okay, so in what way? Because, and I want the benefit to, let me just let you speak. What were you thinking? Okay. So it would be the benefit that they get from the pancakes. What would, yeah, and the need for it to be able to serve that many people, that might be something. Okay, and we could think a little bit more generally about it on what would allow you to buy. I assume that machine's pretty expensive. What would allow you to buy fancier equipment to make more pancakes? More money, more income, right? So income turns out to be probably one of the most important determinants for our purchases, our income. That was ignored over here. Right here was just the price, remember? But how much money you're making will also influence it. So if we had a demand curve here when our income was $30,000 a year. So holding all of the things constant, things like what? Things like your income. Let's suppose you're making 30 grand a year and there's a price of $15. How many will you buy? One. How about $8? 240. How about $4? I'll buy 320. Now what if I change that on you and I say that now you're making $40,000? What happens to that collection of points if you're making 40,000? It goes up, it shifts. We can think of it being kind of up, or we can kind of think of it being to the right, right? See that? That's almost a mystery there. It just depends on how long my golf club is. It turns out I want you guys to always be thinking about the shifts being to the right and to the left, even though technically you're not wrong by thinking of it being up. The reason is pretty simple. the variable that we're holding constant while we change the income is actually price. So in reality, what we're saying is that at $8, used to want to buy at $8 and $30,000 a year, you used to want to buy 240 units. Now you want to buy more. At $4 and $30,000, you used to want to buy 320 units, but now you want to buy more. At $4 and $40,000 of income. At this price, you used to want to buy this much, now you want to buy this much. At this price, you used to want to buy just a little bit, but now that you're a rich guy, you want to buy more. At this price, we used to want to buy this much, now we want to buy this much. And so if we keep doing that for all of the prices, we start to get a whole bunch of points. And this is the way I'd like you guys to think about these demand curves, the lines, because usually lines, by the way, real demand curves aren't necessarily lines. But as I start to collect more and more points, data points of prices and quantities demanded, what starts to happen if I do an infinite number of these? It's a line, right? And so I think mentally, as you guys are learning this material, it's better for you to think about it being a collection of points, because it reminds you that there's two dimensions to the problem with the law of demand, price and quantity. And so think about those lines being collection of points, because it reminds you when you're dangling out here, oh, you mean this and this. It kind of reminds you to go back to both, that there's a connection there. And so this is the demand curve with an income of $40,000. And it lies to the right. As said, it's not totally wrong if you think about it being up, or it'll visually look up, but it's not what's really going on with the underlying fundamentals of it. It's at each price you're buying more. Now, questions on that one? Does your purchases of goods always go up when your income goes up? Are there some goods that you buy less of when you become the richie? Like what? Ramen. Good. Other ones? SpaghettiOs. Yes, and I used to eat those a lot in graduate school too. Oh, God. I don't know if I can stomach them anymore, but SpaghettiOs. Good.
Generic brand.
Generic brand of anything. Generic brand of anything. Good. What else? What's that? Used cars, yeah. So maybe the style of car, maybe it's if we think about new cars, even the basic model versus the souped up, bigger engine, leather interior, all the bells and whistles, right? So maybe the level of car that we purchase, right? Now, is that going to go up or down? So maybe that wasn't a good example. Our car might not be the same as ramen noodles, maybe. So would the demand for the car go up? Yeah, it would probably tend to go up with your income. And so what I want is, when I start going from $30,000 a year to $40,000 a year, what goods head this direction? Ramen noodles, SpaghettiOs, hot dogs is another one. Now, what might you start to be substituting for? Because this is going to be another one coming up here. So as you get more money, you're buying less hot dogs, but more, say, steak, right? So now you're getting into to some ribeyes and get back to a regular hamburger. Instead of bologna, you're buying real cold cuts of beef or something. All right. So under income, we have two categories. And for income, normal goods, we have a category called normal. A normal good is defined as one in which there's a positive relationship between income and quantities purchased. A positive relationship, meaning income goes up, purchases go up. Income goes down, purchases go down. Right? Move in the same direction. So normal good, we have a positive relationship. An increase in income will lead to an increase in demand. So here's a little thing on notation for me too. An up arrow with the D curve. Sorry, you're a little bit hidden. I'll try to get, you need to, there's a nice spot right here. Let's see. There's another spot that's even back further if you wanted to switch. I don't know if you're married to that spot, but I'm going to do a little bit of writing. But I see right next to Brendan, over there. So if you want, or you can copy Drew's paper if you need to. So an increase in demand means a shift to the right. That's my notation. Up arrow D is, here's the D curve. It's going to be shifting to the right. But that's only true if it's a normal good. Ramen noodles, hot dogs, and other things are what economists call inferior goods. Inferior goods have just the opposite effect. An increase in income causes a decrease in demand, a shift to the left.
Negative relationship.
And that's a negative relationship. Good. So using our lingo here, right, this is a positive relationship, and this is a negative relationship. And remember that the arrows move both directions. That's part of what makes it a negative relationship. It's not because one is going up. It also works in reverse. If this goes down, this goes down. If this goes down, this goes up. So if we lose our job after you've been in the workforce for a while, and you're like, oh, I've been really enjoying this ribeye steak and Heineken, and now I've freaking lost my job, right? Income down, PBR up, and hot dogs up, baby, right? So all of a sudden, job loss, we're back to PBR and hot dogs. Hopefully we get that job back in a short order. Income's back up, PBR's down, hot dogs are down, but we've got Heineken and ribeye steak up on the other way, right? So we're substituting those around. Okay, so any questions on income? All right. Since I brought up the couple of these already, number 2 on our shifter list. By the way, that's what we're really defining now. Is this is what I call demand shifters. Demand shifters. These are the things that are going to shift the demand curve around. And for number 2, we've got the price of related goods. And I'm just going to use P subscript RG for related good as my shorthand notation for that. Price of related goods. So, to some degree, hot dogs and steaks are related how? Yeah, you kind of want one or the other, right? So in that respect, they are, if you're looking for protein in some sort of meat-like product, I say meat-like product because steak is really meat-like. Right? Hot dogs, kind of questionable, but meat-like, if you're looking for a meat-like product, those two are substitutes with each other, right? You could use one or the other. One is working for the other, or substituting for the other. So one of the ways that goods are related is that they are substitutes. Substitutes. And so I think I'm going to bring us back to Coke and Pepsi just to keep things good. I don't want to confuse things too much with hot dog and steak, but you can tell the same story with this. But so when we're focusing in on the price rather than the income, if Coke and Pepsi are pretty decent substitutes, not perfect for everybody, right? So there's always that one people, well, you're at borderline from at the restaurant. You're like, I'll take a Diet Coke. Well, would Diet Pepsi be okay, sir? Hell no, give me water. Right? So there's a couple of those people out there. But for the most part, people nod their head and say, yeah, Diet Pepsi would be fine. Right? So they work as substitutes. So if there's an increase in the price of Coke, what happens to the demand for Pepsi? It goes up, right? So these two things are positively related to each other. Price of Coke goes up, it gets more expensive. People buy less Coke, but more Pepsi, right? So an increase in the price of Coke leads to an increase in the demand for Pepsi. And it's important to keep track here the labels, because we're looking at the interrelationship between the goods, Coke and Pepsi. All right, so maybe I'll tie this ultimately back into steaks somehow. So if incomes are going up and people are buying more steaks, so what's going to happen to the price of steaks? It's going to start to go up, right? So I don't like the way this example's heading now that I've characterized it this way, but that's okay. If there's an increase in the price of steaks, what happens to the demand for steak sauce? Goes up? I see some people saying down. Be careful. That's why I said I didn't really like the way this example was heading. So if there's an increase in the price of steak, are people going to buy more steak or less steak? Law of demand says less, right? So what's going to happen to steak sauce? They're going to buy less of it. So steaks and steak sauce are complements with each other. So the other category we have for relationship is two goods can be complements. Now I normally don't emphasize spelling, but how many of you have already written down an I for complement on your papers? How many of you got an I down there? Yep. And again, I'm not grading you for your spelling, but I do want to point out that it's an E. And the only reason I want to do that is to hopefully illustrate you getting this right on the test and on the homeworks, is that you can think about the two completing the set, right? I use steaks and steak sauce together. That's a set. I use those two things. When I eat sandwiches, I eat peanut butter and jelly. So peanut butter and jelly go on the same sandwich. That one completes the other, right? So the two are complements in the sense that they're completing a set. And that kind of helps us work through the issues involved. So if there's a decrease in the price of peanut butter, what happens to the demand for jelly? It goes up, right? Peanut butter's cheaper, people start consuming more peanut butter. Hey, I always have to have jelly with my peanut butter sandwich, so I start buying more jelly too, right? So that's another one that are complements. All right, so an increase in the price of steak, we'll go back to the steak one here. An increase in the price of steak leads to a decrease or increase in the demand for steak sauce? Decrease, good. A decrease in the demand for steak sauce. All right, so negative relationship, positive relationship. And you need to hang your hat on the price thing. You know, it might be helpful to tell you why I didn't like my example right away when I started putting my foot in my mouth, because I had multiple things going on that was kind of confusing. If the price of steak is going up because income's going up, people are going to buy more steak, but they're also going to be able to afford more steak sauce too, right? So I actually had multiple things going on there, and I just thought I'd point out to you why I didn't like that example, because the effect that I'm looking for is the price, using the law of demand only, price of steak goes up, quantity of steak goes down, and then that's why we get the relationship with the steak sauce. Okay? All right, any other questions on those so far? All right, so I've actually given you kind of a couple of the tougher ones. Income and price of related goods. What are some other things that impact? You know, let's think about the demand for pizza in Ottawa. What impacts the demand for pizza other than income? Beer. Okay, well now we're back to the price of related goods. Don't get me wrong, I love to bring beer into the picture, but that probably falls into this category again, right? So if we always drink beer with our pizza, then decrease in the price of beer will cause us an increase in the demand for pizza. That would be the story that we tell. Yeah. Give me your name.
James.
James.
When we're in school and not in school, because there's a lot more people here when we're in school.
Excellent. That's the one I was hoping for. Nice job, James. Let me give you an extra credit point for that. James, why don't you say it again? All of a sudden I heard what'd you say? It was something worth extra credit points, and now they're all like, I better know that.
When we're in school, there's a lot more people in Ottawa that might be eating pizza. So.
Good. What's your last name?
Valentine.
With a V?
B.
B as in Victor?
Yeah.
Okay, or B as in Valentine, actually. But yeah, okay, got it. So, number 3 is the population, which is what James was bringing up. The population. Especially when we increase the population with 700 college kids that have a preference for pizza, that helps out the pizza shops around here a lot when you guys come back to school, right? So the demand for pizza over the summer might have been down here, but as we get into the fall with you guys back in action, it starts to increase the demand. So population, if there's an increase in the population, that leads to an increase in demand. A shift to the right. All right. What else can shape our demand for things? Quality. Okay. So the quality of goods might be reflected in the price. So with quality, we do have to be a little bit careful on whether if we have goods of equal qualities or goods that are relative substitutes. So quality can play a role, but it's going to enter through what I call tastes and preferences. Taste and preferences. So that'll be the shifter that's a little more broad than just quality. So if we start to have a taste for quality goods, then producers will have incentive. That'll be reflected in the price that we're willing to pay for it, right? And so they can afford to make higher quality goods, assuming that those preferences exist. Now, how do businesses signal that they have higher quality, even if it's not? What do they do? Advertising, right? So through advertising, through kind of education or information is really all advertising is, right? They can start to shape our preferences to help us learn about the product. So advertising kind of plays a role in this. When they advertise, what's kind of one of those clever tricks that businesses like to do that gets you more interested in their product through advertising? What are some of the tricks of the trade? Speakers, and what? Promotions, special deals. Yeah, comparing one relative to the other. I don't know if I heard the right thing with speakers or what is it? Celebrities and pictures. You're right, images of people having fun or whatever. So you guys have maybe taken some marketing classes. You kind of got the general gist. You've certainly been exposed to to that all their life, but the celebrity endorsement, right, is kind of a big thing. Oh, if it's good enough for if Nikes are good enough for LeBron James, and if he's using them, then I better use it too, or whatever. So that is our taste and preferences. So if something, for example, is in style, let's see, what's in style right now? I don't think this was so much via advertising other than just guerrilla grassroots, but is there anybody, let me just ask the question differently. Is there anybody in this room that has not played Pokemon Go? There's got to be a few.
Oh, come on.
Oh, that sounds like a lot. Wow, I was expecting only 5 hands or so to go up. So, you know, if something is in style, your demand, so what caused the demand for Pokemon Go to just jump off the charts, basically? What caused that? Everyone's doing it, right? So something is cool. So you are influenced by what other people are doing. Now, if you actually get the game and everybody's doing it, but you think it sucks, then you'll stop doing it. But at least gets you to start doing it potentially. So through advertising, if something's in style, that'll lead to an increase in demand. Right? And so advertising and trends, social trends, whatever we want to call it, advertising and social trends tend to shape this. Sometimes natural occurrences shape this. You know, if it starts raining cats and dogs right now, and I know it's going to rain for the next 4 days, I've changed my taste or preference for umbrellas, right? So if you're, and this is a true story, if you got, there's people that are kind of down and out, you know, the people that are more or less homeless maybe in some circumstances, if they're in New York City, a great little business for them is umbrellas. If they can manage to get together, you know, 10 $2 umbrellas, when the first few drops start coming down, they can unload those for probably 10 to 15 bucks, right? Because even if you have an umbrella at home, your taste or preferences for umbrellas that day changed pretty instantaneously. And while when the sun is shining, you aren't going to pay $15 for an umbrella. When it's cats and dogs and you've got a nice leather purse on and some decent clothes, you're willing to pay 15 bucks, no problem, right? So all due to a change in our taste or preferences. Okay, good. Lastly, expectations. Our expectations. Yes, expected income would be right up there at the top of the charts here. So Kylie asked, would expected income? Yes, absolutely. In fact, usually to a fault. People will change their demand based on their expected income rather than their actual income. So if there's an increase in your expected income, here's kind of the notation that I'll use quite a bit for expected is a capital E with brackets over whatever's changing. That's one way I do it. So expected. I also might do it as just kind of a or an increase in expected income. This is probably the only two ways that I really do expected. This is kind of a mathematical way. And this one I just kind of put a little E on it. Just something to denote that it's expected income, not your actual income. So if you have an increase in expected income, what happens to your demand for goods and services today? Does it go up or down? Up, right? How many of you are currently spending some of your expected income? Today, this week, this year, fall semester. How many of you are spending some of your expected income? That was one of the reasons you took on the student debt, was thinking that I hope that my income after I graduate from here is going to be a wee bit higher than what it would have been just coming out of high school, right? Now, the data supports that, depending on your major. By the way, this is as good a time as any for me to mention how awesome the business economics majors do in the labor market. So they're up there in terms of starting pay, highest among all the business majors, by the way. Any of you that want to talk about the business economics major in a little more detail. You're going to spend 4 years here anyway, or those of you who are partway into your journey, you know, should I study this, should I study that? If you kind of dig this econ stuff like I do, business econ's a pretty good choice. It's gonna pay back. It's going to pay back a little bit more than some of the other majors. Anyway, I'll get into that data at a different time a little bit more. So, an increase in expected income leads to an increase in demand today. So think about the purchases today. So an increase in expected income leads to an increase in demand today. Now, expectations is pretty broad. If there's an increase, if there's an expected increase in the price of gasoline next week, what do you do today? Buy gas today, right? So there's another example. Let's do a second example. Example number 2. If there's an increase in the expected price of gas, that'll lead you to an increase in demand for gas today. Now, interestingly enough, if there's an increase in the price of gas, what happens to the demand, the quantity demanded of gas? It goes down, right? Law of demand is just the opposite. So check that out. What we think is going to happen in the future plays an important role today. That's what this expectations thing is all about. Pretty important. Okay. So any other ones that you can think of that you don't think are covered here? Because I'm going to argue that this list of 5 things covers really all that you need to know for all of the shifters. But you're going to get lots of different problems that have different ones, but I like to have them all in one spot. Is there any here that you think I've missed out of the 5, the list of 5? Savings, okay, what about it? What about it?
You have more money.
The level of savings? Yeah, no, that's a fair thing to put. So if we have savings and then also credit, the access to credit is another one that I think the textbook maybe brings up too. All of those will kind of fall into that income or expected income category. We can roll those into it. So you might see a slightly worded differently on some of the text, but that can be rolled into it. And yeah, that can make a difference because your savings, if you have $100,000 in the bank, but you don't have a job, technically your job is your income. And if your interest rate is real low on your savings, it's not like you're making a lot of interest income off of your savings. If you've got it in the bank over here, you're earning a whopping 0.25% or something, but you're able to spend money because of your savings. So that could be a determinant with a wealth effect, but would fall into one of these other categories. All right, so put a little note in your notes that you should memorize these 5 things. You should be able to roll these right off the top of your head. Memorize the list of demand shifters. And in other words, if you were asked on a quiz something, you should be able to do income, price of related goods, population, taste or preferences, expectations. You know, and maybe you guys can do I don't even know what you call those things, little acronym. Well, it's an acronym of sorts, but kind of a memorization technique here. So what was it? Income. What order did we do it in? Price of related goods. Population. Taste or preferences. And expectations. So you could do Instead of pooping Pop-Tarts, try excellent. That's a good one. I like that. So instead of pooping Pop-Tarts, try X-Lax. You know, whatever memorization technique, take those 5 things and have that committed to memory. You know, some of you might want to sing a song or you can come up with something, but have that stupid type of thing for these, because you're going to have questions to where you're going to need to apply it. So you'll have some problems in your homework where you're going to be working through, and you just have to know, oh, we're talking about population. That must be something to do with the demand curve. All right. So let's do a quick little example here, since we've got a couple minutes left. So I want you to get really comfortable with what I call home base. Home base. Home base is this, with a few more things added onto it. So be able to do a downward sloping demand curve because of the law of demand, an upward sloping curve because of the law of increasing cost, but mostly be able to draw this graph really quickly, upward sloping supply, downward sloping demand, do the axes. Don't forget your labels, which you've got price here and quantity here, and then do a P star and a Q star, equilibrium price and quantity. If you can go back to home base, so anytime I have a problem for you, if you can start the problem by saying what home base looks like, it's going to allow your brain to take it to the next level. So, you know, if there is a, oh shoot, I could, yeah, let's see, yeah, okay, this works. So, suppose that there is a broken water main in, just hypothetically. Suppose, so here's your example. Suppose a water main breaks. A water main breaks in Ottawa. What is the impact in the bottled water industry, bottled water market?
Yeah.
Be sure to specialize, or be sure to show the increase to equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So no matter what the problem is, home base gives you that starting place. And so if there is some unfortunate accident that leads to a water main break in Ottawa, where you're not going to be able to use water for a while, what happens? Demand shifts to the right, right. So as we shift to the right, what's your prediction of what's going to happen to price? It's going to go up, right? That would be the prediction. There'd be upward pressure on price and an increase in equilibrium quantity. And so we'd expect there to be an increase in demand to P, from P1 to P2, and from Q1 to Q2. An increase in the quantity demanded and an increase in price. All right, we'll pick up there on Wednesday. Oh, check your watches. You are being let out early today. Just wanted to point that out. Very rare occasion.